everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill.
And I'm Bill Mulvihill.
Welcome back to our vegetable garden. We are gardening in hardiness zone 5B, and we have had quite a few frosts, so it is time to harvest our potatoes, carrots, and beets. And we'll show you how we store them too.
We grew our potatoes in grow bags that are watered from the drip irrigation that's attached to the adjacent bed. We've removed the drip tubing now. You can see these colorful bags. We got several of them from Gardener's Supply. As you notice, the foliage has died back on the potatoes from the frost. In the background there, the carrots, they're tougher, but it's time to harvest them as well. So we're going to get set up to harvest.
The nice thing about growing potatoes in grow bags is that you just dump out the contents and harvest them that way rather than risking damaging them with a trowel or something like that. We grew them in a mixture of compost and some organic potting soil, and I'm really excited to see what we've got. They're kind of little so far, but plentiful. Didn't miss anything?
Yep.
Oh, look at all the ones you got. I was focusing on mine. And this teeny tiny little one.
Let's do one more.
Do a second one?
Here. Yeah. Just right on top.
Okay, now we're talking.
Oh, sure. You got the nice big one.
Finders keepers. Ooh, look at that one.
Hmm. We have oyster shells in our compost.
Oh, there's one.
Some little guys. Boy, so that one wasn't
That
very
didn't have
impressive.
quite so many, did it?
No.
And another dinky little guy. It was a tough growing season, though. We started out with a super cold, rainy spring, and then that was followed by an immediate transition to a very hot, dry summer. So this is a start. We'll see what we end up with. Don't miss the little guy. Okay, so here is our harvest. The majority of the potatoes are bluebells. They are difficult to find, so each year we set aside a few to use as seed potatoes for the following spring. There's also a couple of russets in there, but it's really mostly bluebells. Now it's time to harvest the carrots, and they are a little more challenging because you certainly don't want to spear them with a spading fork while you're digging them. That's an interesting one.
On the middle, there's some onions in the middle here.
Wow. So we'll show you what the carrots look like once we're done. You might recall that in a recent video I mentioned how we were having a lot of problems with our carrot crop, specifically splitting, cracking, and deformities. That is caused by watering issues and mainly overwatering. They just do not like a lot of water. Well, when our heat wave arrived this summer, we cranked up the time that our water system ran here in the garden. And everything is on the same timer. So while the tomatoes and the squash and other veggies benefited from that extra time, the carrots did not like it, and they started having these deformity issues. It's really frustrating, and obviously we need to come up with a solution for next year so that they don't get too much water. But let me show you what our harvest ended up being. So here are all of the normal carrots, although I have to admit there are a couple that just barely had a problem, so I put them in this batch. Now let me show you the deformed ones. Sadly, this is the majority. You'll notice there are split roots. There's lots of ones that have extra legs. And the great news is that so much of this is usable, so we'll just remove anything that isn't usable and get plenty of enjoyment from it. But you can see I've got some interesting ones here, and that is extremely frustrating. Those cracks are really a showstopper too. Live and learn. Okay, it's beet harvesting time, and we've got 2 beds of beets, so Bill is picking one of them, and then I'm going to pick the beets from this covered raised bed that we grew them in. That cover is a DIY project in my Vegetable Garden Pest Handbook, and also it is covered with agricultural insect netting, which has been ideal for keeping leaf miner flies away from the beet crops and also the Swiss chard that's in the same bed. Now the Swiss chard is something that I will harvest as much of as I can and steam and freeze the leaves, but they're not something I can store any other way. You'll notice that the sun is lower in the sky, so this bed is in the shade more than it used to be. But here's the Swiss chard, and then I have a couple of rows of beets. I have golden beets and cylindra beets. And they are much easier to pull than the carrots, that's for sure. Look at those roots, oh boy. Well, there's a whopper. Let's see how those golden beets are looking. They typically tend to be a little more petite, pretty color though, than the cylindras. Now if you're looking for beet varieties, both of these ones are awesome, and the cylindra ones are also called cylindrical. So you might see it listed that way too. one thing that I'm going to do before storing them is I'm going to cut off all of the good leaves because they are so tasty when steamed with a little butter and some red wine vinegar. Yum. Okay, here are the golden beets, and I'm very happy with the harvest. Much better than those carrots. Let me show you the cylindra beets because, wow, it's amazing. Okay, what you're looking at are stacks and stacks of beets. Mostly of a pretty good size, a few smaller. And the funny thing is that normally we never have enough beets, and so I planted extras this year. And I may have gone a little bit overboard, but we do love roasted beets. We can share them, we can donate some to the food bank, and we'll see how it goes so that I can make a decision for next year. But this is amazing. Well, it's going to take us a bit to clean all this up, and then we'll be back to show you our storage method. Well, that was a bit of a job preparing the beets for storage, but I saved the best leaves that we can steam for dinner tonight, and then I left a few inches of stem on the tops of each beet. So that's done. I wanted to show you, here's all of the cylindra beets, here are the golden beets, and the next step is to put them into a bin with lightly moistened straw. We have been using this method for quite a few years and it works really well. What we use for storing our root crops is these large plastic bins. They do have lids and we rest them on, but we don't snap the lid on the top because we want to have good air circulation around the veggies. So I have filled the bottom with some straw. Our straw has been pre-moistened a couple days ago so that it's lightly moist. We don't want it sopping wet. And you do not need to wash your root crops before they go into storage. So I'm going to put in a few of the cylindras on the bottom. And then I'll put in another layer of straw. And I want to put all of the golden beets in here. Put in a little bit more straw. Put in the rest of them. I'll just spread them out in here. And then put some more straw over the top of them. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to repeat the process with another container and put in the cylindra beets. I also just noticed that there is a sign on the side of the bin that says carrots and potatoes. That was from last year, so obviously I'm going to need to relabel this. When you have a few containers in your garage or wherever you decide to store them, it's very important to label them so you don't have to keep digging through the straw. Now that brings up an important point. We keep these in our garage, and the garage is insulated, but it is not heated, so it gets very chilly during the winter months, and that chilling is really a way to keep the produce fresh. So that's where we keep ours. I hope that's an option for you as well. It just depends on how low your temperature goes, because you really want to keep these cool but not frozen. Okay, for the carrots, I'm doing the same routine. I'm actually putting kind of the crummy looking carrots near the bottom so I can use the pristine ones first. That might seem counterintuitive, but it's just what I want to do. You do not need to wash off the carrots before you put them into storage. Just wash them off when you're ready to use them. There's a whopper. Okay, let's talk about storing potatoes over the winter months. I do have a couple of cautions for you. First of all, you definitely do not want to wash off your potatoes and put them into storage wet, because it can promote rotting. I know that we're using lightly moistened straw, but it's at a minimum. You don't want these to be all wet and muddy. So just go ahead and pack them in as is. They still have some soil on, which you'll wash off when you use the potato. But if you had a problem with the disease called bacterial soft rot on your potato crop this summer, this method might not work for you. With bacterial soft rot, there are lesions on the potatoes, the stems of the plants rot, and these will not do well in storage. So I just want to caution you that you might want to either experiment with this method of using the lightly moistened straw, or to come up with a different method to use up your potatoes very quickly, because they will contaminate the whole bin very quickly if they have that rotting going on. So that's bacterial soft rot, just so you know. So I have some dry straw in the bottom of this bin, and that's because I don't want them sitting in any extra moisture. And I'm just going to do some layers of potatoes and then put a layer of lightly moistened straw, do another layer, and so on until I run out of potatoes, and then I'll put another layer of straw on the top. This method has worked so well for us. In the old days, before we came up with this method, they used to get rubbery and shriveled up very quickly. This is the first method we have ever come across that works so well in keeping potatoes for the whole winter. Okay, our root crops are all packed up and ready to go into our garage. Thanks so much for watching today, everybody. I hope that you have a bountiful harvest. See you later.
Bye.